In the mid-2010s, two Stanford grads set out to change the smoking industry forever. Adam Bowen and James Monsees were brilliant product designers with one shared obsession: creating the perfect alternative to cigarettes. They saw themselves as innovators, pioneering a sleek, minimalistic device that helped smokers quit their nasty habit. And their device worked. Within a few years, their product, Juul, spread like wildfire across the US, raking in billions and being praised by millions. By 2018, their company controlled over 75% of the e-cigarette market, was valued at $38 billion, and had one of the biggest names in big tobacco backing their every move. But there was one massive problem. Juul wasn't just helping smokers quit. It was creating a brand new generation of nicotine addicts, getting millions of kids and teens hooked on their product. And suddenly, the duo found themselves at the center of a massive national scandal. What started as a billion-dollar revolution quickly spiraled into one of the most infamous downfalls in business history. And by the end of it all, they had nearly lost everything. Adam and James met in 2004 while enrolling in Stanford's product design graduate program, and realized they had two things in common. They loved product design and smoked way too many stoves. They bonded over their cigarette breaks, where they talked about life, product ideas, and on a more serious note, how their habit was killing them. Now, they both wanted to kick their smoking, but at the time, there weren't really any great alternatives. But what if they made something better? I mean, they were taking graduate-level product design classes at a school with a sub 4% acceptance rate, so they clearly had the brains for it. But before they jumped into anything, they did a little research into smoking alternatives just to see what was out there, which is where they stumbled upon e-cigarettes. Unlike regular cigs, e-cigs didn't burn tobacco. They essentially heated liquid nicotine into vapor. This seemed enticing to them, not just from an invention standpoint, but for their own personal lives. However, these e-cigs on the market in 2004 were downright garbage. They were chunky, ugly, and worst of all, they weren't satisfying enough to a typical smoker. Light bulbs started to ignite. Between their shared desire to quit smoking, their extensive knowledge of product design, and a perfectly timed thesis project that they needed a topic for, the fellas knew they were sitting on a golden idea. An e-cigarette that was sleek, portable, and gave smokers what they wanted without causing as much harm as cigarettes. And so, by mid-2007, Adam and James had finally done it. And by done it, I mean completely botched their idea. That year, they developed the first concept for their revolutionary e-cig: Plume. Now, Plume was sleek and had a better design than the clunkers that existed before it. But it wasn't perfect by any sense of the word. First of all, it ran on butane, which was not only annoying to keep refilling, but it was a fire hazard. Also, the heating element the butane fueled was way too close to the mouthpiece, which gave users burns. Shit, one of the prototypes even exploded in their office, which at that point, I just go back to chain smoking. Now, Adam and James did secure $400,000 from investors, so they had some financial runway to keep tweaking the design. But it just kept falling through. Plain and simple, the device was weak and barely delivered the nicotine smokers crave. Sales flopped, and the company's reputation took a nosedive right along with them. But remember, the duo was smart, and smart people just know what to do. So when they knew they were sitting on a busted idea, they did the smart decision of moving on. In early 2015, they sold Plume to Japan Tobacco International. Shortly after, they rebranded their company to Pax Labs and started from scratch designing two products. One for consuming cannabis, and one that would change their life forever. But wouldn't you want to know about a product that could change your life forever? Well, let me introduce you to the sponsor of today's video, Aura. I remember one morning I was sipping on a cup of joe in my boxers reading my emails, when suddenly I got one from a company saying my info was a part of a data breach. Not gonna lie, I was pretty furious, yet I felt powerless because there was nothing I could do. It's times like these when I wish I knew about Aura. They monitor the dark web 24/7 and alert you if your info pops up somewhere sketchy, so you can actually do something about it before some dude in a basement halfway across the world opens a credit card in your name. And if someone does try to use your info, Aura lets you know fast and even helps protect your credit and bank accounts. Oh, and worst case scenario, they've got you covered with up to $5 million in identity theft insurance. Plus, Aura even finds those shady data brokers who are selling your info to spam callers and telemarketers, and they submit opt-out requests on your behalf. That means less spam in your inbox and fewer scam calls asking you if you'd like to extend your car's warranty. And on top of all of that, they give you a VPN with over 100 virtual locations. So if you want to stop cyber criminals from making you their next target, go to aura.com/bcproductions to try Aura free for 14 days. Because at the end of the day, no one's going to protect your info for you. but aura will. Now, back to the story. Adam and James still knew deep down that there was a need for a better e-cigarette. Sure, their first attempt was hot garbo, but that didn't mean they were going to quit. Instead, they doubled down, reviewing literally millions of tobacco industry documents, consulting with public health experts, scientists, engineers, and chemists to finally create the Juul in mid-2015. The boys had created the Mona Lisa of e-cigs. It was sleek, the most subtle, the most minimalistic, the least stinkiest, and sexiest vape out by a long shot. But the looks were just the start of it. Adam and James's design background really shined through the Juul's pod system. It was one of a kind. A simple two-part system that was easy to use and, most importantly, contained a nicotine salt formula that was absorbed into the bloodstream at a similar rate to cigarettes. It was way better than the pipe bomb they created 8 years prior, and all that was left to do was to get it out to the world, which is where they fucked up big time. When brainstorming ways to market their new iPhone-looking device, Adam and James remembered some interesting information they learned while looking through those old tobacco documents. You see, back when cigarettes were in their prime, they were often marketed in a way that made them seem awesome. Themes of pleasure, relaxation, romance, and socialization showed up time and time and time and time again for decades. This type of marketing was arguably the number one thing that made cigs so damn popular. Now, this type of advertising for tobacco was eventually banned in the early 70s because, well, it made cigs so damn popular. But you can't argue that this strategy wasn't smart. And the duo knew that. They wanted Juul to foster the same vibes as those ads, portraying it as something desirable, cool, and the go-to for smokers, which is where the Vaporize campaign was born. Now remember when I said the duo fucked up when it came to putting Juul out into the world? Well, Vaporize was the first phase of many in that plan. The campaign was mainly focused around youth-oriented imagery, with billboards, social media posts, and pop-up events all featuring models in their 20s dressed casually and trendy. They also used this imagery in ad space they bought on sites like Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, Coolmac.com, and a plethora of other kid-focused websites, which is absolutely insane. But these ads were awfully close to the 60s cigarette ads that Adam and James took inspiration from, and they worked in the same fashion. Juul started to catch some initial buzz by the end of 2016, increasing sales by 700% and selling 2.2 million devices. Now, were some of the 2.2 million devices landing into the hands of young people? Absolutely. But at this point, Juul only made up less than 5% of the e-cigarette market, so no one really batted an eye. In 2017, though, this problem only got worse. And it was almost like Adam and James wanted it to get worse. They doubled down on the youthful vibe they had created and went straight to the source of all teens. Social media. Specifically, they recruited influencers who had anywhere from thousands to millions of followers in fashion, music, and entertainment and gave them free products to promote. They went on sampling tours, which were essentially pop-up parties in New York City, LA, Las Vegas, Miami, and more, where they held events at nightclubs and encouraged influencers to come out and promote their products while having baddies hand out free products too. They reached out to A-listers like Katy Perry, Miley Cyrus, Nick Cage, Elijah Wood, and more to promote their stuff as well. And all while that was happening, an indestructible online culture was forming around Juul. I'm sure you've seen the thousands of videos with millions of views of obviously teenage boys and girls blowing fat O's and looking like douches with their Juul. But sadly, I can't show any because YouTube will come for my ass. And quite frankly, I doubt any of you would want to see those videos anyway. But you get the point. This social media marketing blitz worked like a charm for Adam and James, and the numbers proved it. By the end of 2017, Juul's sales ballooned to 224 million. They controlled nearly a third of the e-cigarette market and became the fastest company ever to reach a $10 billion valuation. In their minds, the duo had accomplished what they wanted. Their company was well known, their products were flying off shelves, and millions of smokers were converting over to Juul. But through everything we just covered for the past couple of minutes, a new problem came to fruition. If it wasn't obvious by now, Juul had become way more popular with teens who were non-smokers than smokers. And this fact wasn't more apparent anywhere else than in schools. Thousands of schools across America became Juul rooms with desks in them. The sleek USB-like design made it easy for kids to stash them in their book bags and rip them anywhere from hallways to bathrooms and even in class. And a plethora of data backs this up. Teenagers aged 15 to 17 were 16 times more likely to use Juul than those aged 25 to 34. 1 in 5 students between the ages of 12 and 17 had seen a Juul used in school. Almost 40% of high school seniors admitted to vaping within the previous year by the end of 2018. By 2019, 1 in 4 high school students and 1 in 10 middle school students were using e-cigs, and Juul was the most popular brand. These facts, combined with many more data points, had Adam and James dead to rights. They promised to help adult smokers quit, but instead they created a whole new problem. kids being addicted to nicotine. And slowly over time, parents, teachers, and lawmakers found out about this issue. And because Juul had now captured 75% of the e-cig market by the end of 2018, they became the obvious target for regulation. The beatdown on the boys started in April of 2018, when the FDA took their first step toward fighting Juul by requesting marketing documents from the company, believing that the Vaporize campaign and the other stuff they did online was intentionally targeted toward children. Adam and James were quivering when they received this notice, realizing how bad the underage usage problem had got. To get a head start on the inevitable bad PR, they launched a $30 million initiative that same month, an initiative that set out to create a comprehensive strategy to combat underage use. A couple months later, they announced a promise to only use adult models in their ads through a brand new campaign and removed anything off their social media accounts that wasn't adult themed. Talk about being guilty, man. I mean, like, how more obvious can you get? But these stunts didn't really stop anyone, and the pressure on the duo only got worse. A couple of states, including Massachusetts and North Carolina, launched investigations into Juul and their previous advertising, all while the FDA successfully seized thousands of documents from Juul HQ as a part of their crackdown. Speaking of the FDA, their commissioner Scott Gottlieb called teenage vaping an epidemic in September of 2018, which only ramped up the temperature of the already boiling pot of water Juul was stewing in. It seemed like it was all over for Adam and James. The revolutionary product they once saw as the cure to smoking had pretty much turned on them, albeit through their own choices, and it seemed like they were going to be shut down in no time. That is, until the devil came knocking on their door. Altria, the makers of Marlboro cigarettes, struck a deal with Juul in December of 2018, offering them $12.8 billion in exchange for 35% of the company. This deal was insane for many reasons. For Altria, they were buying into a company that had maybe the worst PR of all time, and for the duo, they had just sold a massive chunk of their company to a cigarette maker, a company they probably wanted to destroy years prior. At its core, however, it's safe to assume that this deal was a life-saving bailout in the eyes of Adam and James. With every parent, lawmaker, health professional, and more laying the hammer down on Juul, this partial exit from their company was a nice little safety net for them if things went to shit. And it sure did. As 2019 ensued, worse and worse crackdowns were targeted at the iPhone of e-cigs. The U.S. House of Representatives launched their own investigation into Juul in July, looking into their past advertising, their deal with Altria, among other things. In September, the FDA gave another warning to Juul regarding their deceptive marketing practices. Juul was also forced to stop selling their fun flavors like mango, creme brulee, and fruit medley in October, which definitely had some 16-year-olds across the country going apeshit. In 2020 was more or less the same story. More flavor bans, more laws to prevent young people from vaping, and more studies revealing that, yes, children seeing young models ripping cool flash drives made them want to do the same. But it wasn't until 2022 that the government's entire hog was smacked down on the desks of Adam and James. That was the year that the FDA finally called it quits on its warnings and took action. In June, they ordered Juul to pull all of its products from the U.S. market, stating that they had enough evidence to prove that Juul played a disproportionate role in the rise of youth vaping. This meant that Juul legally could not market, ship, or sell their products in the States. However, this ban wasn't permanent by any means. It actually lasted less than 24 hours. On the same day the FDA ordered the ban, Adam and James submitted an appeal to the U.S. Court of Appeals, which gave them time for their products to remain on store shelves while the court reviewed their case. From then on, the duo dedicated all of their time trying to win over the FDA. They scrambled to gather as much scientific evidence as possible to justify its place in the market. But the FDA wasn't convinced. To them, the damage was already done, and Juul could feel the wrath coming. To try and make good, Adam and James started to shell out millions and millions and millions of dollars. Specifically, they paid out lawsuits. One for $462 million, another for $255 million, a third for $23.8 million, and an additional $1.2 billion across 10,000 lawsuits, all pertaining to the company's contribution to getting high schoolers fiending for mango pots. Not to mention, Altria also paid a $235 million settlement related to Juul, bringing the total settlement payments made to roughly $2.1 billion. I don't know about you, but that makes my bank account want to jump off a balcony headfirst right into concrete. And Juul's evaluation pretty much did that, plummeting from a peak of $38 billion in 2018 to $250 million in 2023, a 99.34% decrease. Ouch. Now, while that decrease felt like a gigantic punch in the gut for Adam and James, it still wasn't all over for them. They scrambled to cut over $1 billion in costs, mainly through laying off 3/4 of their 3,000 corporate employees, and received their minority stake back from Altria, who, by the way, lost $12.5 billion from that deal. Ouch, again. This was at least something, but at this point, they needed literally a Hail Mary prayer answer to have any sort of hope for the future of Juul. and they got one. On June 6, 2024, the FDA ended up rescinding its 2022 marketing ban on Juul, moving the company's products back into pre-market status. This means that Adam and James can still sell Juul products in the US for the time being, but this still doesn't guarantee anything. The application is still pending, and as of 2025, the FDA is still evaluating Juul's ability to keep its products out of the hands of minors and the safety of its devices and pods. So, Adam and James barely made it out alive. But with a horrible public image, tough financial outlook, and other competitors becoming the new favorites for smokers and non-smokers, it's still a steep hill to climb, which is probably why both Adam and James have, for the most part, removed themselves from the company.